Hi everyone. Here's a video on creating a dot plot. A dot plot is just a graphical representation of our data. It's one of many different types of data that we have. So of graphs that we have, and so let's take a look at some data. I found a set of data of test scores, and here they all are in a chart. So there's actually 60 test scores here, and here they all are. And by just glancing at the test scores, it becomes very difficult to sort of draw any conclusions about how your students did or what kind of test it was. And so we create graphs and so that we can see the data, makes it a little easier to analyze the data and draw some conclusions. So what exactly is a dot plot? Well, I started a little scale here for you. Let me turn this one off. And what we have here is a dot plot scale, which is really just a number line with the x-axis being whatever your data is. In this case, it's test scores. And the y-axis over here is your frequency. So the scale here, we don't want to start at 0 because really the lowest test score that I can even find looks like there's a 49 right here. But other than that, there is no scores in the 40s. So let's just start plotting these points, and that's all you do is. So let's start with this first one. This is a 60 right here, and it's a bit tedious, but here is one person with a 60, and I'm just going to put a dot right here. And these are the numbers here. There's one person. Here's another person. 3, 4, 5. Stop the scale at 6. A lot's just going to depend on how many what your frequency is for each score. Here's a score of 55. Here's a score. There's a score of 68, which is right here. Again, this is going to be a little sloppy because I don't have graph paper, but now what happens right here? 71. We have two scores of 71. So here's 71. Here's one person, and now here's another person. And so on. We have another 65. Here's a 65 here. Notice here we have an 88. Somebody did really well and got an 88, so we're over here. And you can just continue on through these 60 pieces of data. We notice over here somebody got a 91, so that one on, and so on. So what I'm going to do now is pause the video, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in the rest of this dot plot. You can maybe do the same, and we'll come back to it. Okay, so it's a rather tedious job, but eventually you can plot all these points, and hopefully it looks a little something like this. And now it's a little easier to possibly draw some conclusions about our data. What does it look like? Well, let me take another color here. So what are some things we notice about the dots? Well, one thing is they have a certain spot where they peak, clearly right here. This group of data, let's see, get my pen back. And so clearly this right here, where we're at a 74, it looks like, is a very high bump. We have a lot of data up here. One thing we might notice is that as the scores get lower, we have less and less students that seems to happen to. Somebody and then out there. But notice what happens this way. We have a kind of a sharp downward turn over here. I might even call this person here who got the 98 a bit of an outlier because the next highest score before him is here at a 90. So what do we notice about the spread of our data? What does it sort of look like? Is it symmetrically spread out along this high point here? Where is the bulk of our data, and is there a skewedness to it, meaning it sort of shifts from one side to another? I would say we have a little bit of a skew here to the left. What does that tell us about the data? Maybe it tells us that we have a lot of students, or more students maybe than we should here in this lower score, not so many up here to balance that out. We might draw a conclusion that this exam was a little bit difficult. The average score or the bulk of students kind of are in this area, which is really in the 70s. Maybe we'd like to see an exam that's where the average is more in the 80s in a B score. So I might analyze my exam after looking at this dot plot and say to myself, okay, I'm going to adjust these scores, or I'm going to take a look at my exam and see if it was maybe a little bit too hard. Lots of things we can discuss when we look at data. Now this is rather messy because we did it by hand. So I'm going to show you what we did here with on the computer in Excel. Same idea here. We have our test scores down here, and you can see it's just a little more organized. And again, I would sort of agree with that kind of spread here, that we had a little bit of a, whoops, a little bit of a skew to the left. Maybe somewhat normally symmetrically distributed, but for the most part, I'd say it's slightly skewed to the left. And then here's sort of the expected value in here, maybe in this range right here. So that's a dot plot, and that's what you can think about it. So when you get with your homework, you can refer to this video.